CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you don't download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now joining me on CFL Talk, the brains of the group, David Morassutti. David, how you doing, buddy?
Sore.
Sore? Yeah. I
I
guess.
got Canadian workout.
Yeah. So somebody had to shovel some snow today.
Well, someone tried to also get a snowboard to work, and it was only half operational. It doesn't help when you have the biggest snowfall in God knows how many years.
Yeah, but that's a snowfall on a Monday in Wasaga, so I'm not really feeling that sympathetic for you.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing: you at least have practice. I had no practice going into this. I think I
Uh,
may, I think I may have used my shovel twice up to this point, and both times I got it done within like 20-30 minutes.
I have to admit, because I start the snowblower now and it goes on its own. It knows exactly where to go.
It's like a Roomba, one of those.
Have you? I'm sorry, I changed the subject and I didn't mean to. But have you seen the new remote control snowblowers?
If it hasn't been invented, Frank, let's go to what is it? Dragon's Den. We'll go and pitch them. I'm sure we
Oh,
get
for sure. A
all the money.
Roomba snowblower. They've got that invented. Yeah. So you had a lot of snow today, and you have the good fortune of having a fire hydrant on your property.
Oh my god! And that fire hydrant isn't completely visible from the street, thanks to the city of Toronto's snowplows.
Hey, listen, we have here. We live on a kind of a main street, not a main street, but a main street. Well, for where I am, yeah, it's a main street, and the snowplows go by here at about I'm going to say about 60 kilometers an hour. So it's not like on a side street they go pretty slow, right? No, and that snow, it fires at a good 15-20 feet. So it's just so you end up with a lot of snow deep into your driveway, and unfortunately, I have the neighbor's lawn on one side, and I have a bunch of a line of trees on that side, and on the other side, I put a fence up. So I literally have it's very difficult for me to get rid of the snow. But I'll tell you, the snowblower worked, thank goodness, and without it, I would not survive. I'll tell you, the weather has gotten ugly, but it wasn't that bad for us today as it was for you. You said what? How high was it?
By the time I got out there, because I worked the night before, it was about up to my waist. I'm about I would say close to three. I would say 3 feet, and it's
Wow,
no exaggeration. Like
wow.
it just and the problem was it was also blowing snow. Like I was looking at the top of my house, and I said, "Oh boy!" Like I have a skylight at my front entrance. I walked into my house. It was complete darkness because the skylight was completely covered.
Yeah, and because if there's a couple inches of snow, the sun still goes through the snow. So
Exactly.
the snow had to be really deep for the light not to go through the snow, because the snow is not opaque, but
It's the first
deep
time
enough.
ever.
Deep enough. Yeah. Well, that's funny. That's funny. Well, listen, it's playoff time in the NFL. I know we're a CFL show, but football is football. Let's be clear. And the CFL is not playing right now. And anybody who loves the game of football, which I think most CFL fans are, you don't have to love the NFL, but it's still football. So I'm watching, and I guess the weekend was really interesting. We saw teams that should win, and we saw a team that should have won not win. And the way they didn't win was amazing. You know what I'm talking about. The star team, the Dallas Cowboys, lose in something that can't happen in the CFL. You cannot lose. The clock cannot run out on you in the CFL. You get to make that last play.
I think, did you call me or I called you at the end of that game?
I think I
And
called you. I was
and
calling
the
you to
very
wish.
first thing I said to you, Frank, this is why I like the CFL more than the NFL. because like this is the part that um this
for
is
for for honesty here, let's we both like the Dallas Cowboys. I think you like them a little more than
I've
I
been
do.
a long suffering Dallas Cowboys fan. I have very rare good memories of the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know what it is. I think it was partly because my cousin was a Cowboys fan and I admired my cousin. Now I guess he goes down the totem pole of favorite cousins after bringing me through this level of misery all these years. But yeah, I think, and I'm surprised. And the thing that surprised me, Frank, I didn't hear a single CFL fan say this wouldn't happen in the CFL. I didn't see that. You and I were the ones. We should have put that out there, and I wonder what would have happened.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I put it out there. I'm not sure. I might have put it out there as a response to somebody else, but um, the thing of it is that it doesn't happen in the Canadian Football League. We have a 3 minute warning, not a 2 minute warning. The Canadian Football League, you know, listen, we can talk about how it's become, what but historically, the Canadian Football League, it's almost like the NBA, right? Where everything the game is the last few minutes. The game, if you miss the beginning of the game and you watch the last half of the quarter, the last quarter, you're going to watch the most exciting part of the Canadian Football League, or at least the opportunity to be exciting. And that's what I think NFL fans were denied, regardless of whether you're a Cowboy fan or not. We saw probably one of the most exciting games, at least this weekend for sure. At the end of the game, this was the most interesting game of the weekend, and it was building up, and it was becoming one of those games where it wasn't just about a team doing well. It was about teams not putting, like for example, San Francisco not putting the Cowboys to bed. All these wonderful openings, and the game wasn't over, and then it ends because the clock runs out, and in a very contentious way. So for the viewers, explain to them, in case they weren't watching because they're CFL fans and they didn't watch, explain to the fans that are watching what happened.
Okay, so after so the 49ers, it's funny because this reminds me of the Argos earlier against BC.
See, that's where we were going to go with this,
So,
folks. Yeah. We're
so
going to
in the
go to the CFL.
so the 49ers needed to get a first down so that they could run out the rest of the clock and basically end the game. Well, what happened was the Cowboys were able to get a stop and forced the 49ers to punt the ball back. Well, they had about I think 40 seconds left in the game, no timeouts, and they had to try to march all the way down the field and they needed a touchdown. Well, it was getting interesting because a 10-yard pass, sidelines, stop the clock. 10-yard pass outside. Because I mean, because that's the only way you can stop the clock. Obviously, in the CFL, you get time to set the ball, and as soon as the plays whistled in,
Then you
that's
go,
when
yeah.
the clock starts. So that's the big difference there. And so it got to about 14 seconds left in the game, and Dak Prescott, the Cowboys quarterback, decides all the 49ers defenders are on the sidelines.
Right,
They're
which is what they should have done in the first place,
yes.
if you listen to Romo.
So the point was the Cowboys said, "Okay, we're going to take that run up the middle to get the yards we need and quickly spike the ball." Well, as I read today, usually you need about 17 to 18 seconds to pull off a play like that. And what happened was the Cowboys ran a little bit too far. They got a little too excited about how many yards they were getting. And so as the referee tried to come and set the ball and bumped into a few Cowboys on the way to do it because they didn't do this properly,
still running.
Hi,
Now
Eduardo. To the rescue comes Eduardo.
the connection got lost. Okay, we're back.
Yeah,
The connection got lost, and Eduardo was busy. All
yeah,
right,
it
so
froze for a second there for me. So basically, just to tidy this up, Cowboys lost the game because they didn't have enough time to spike the ball, which in the CFL would never happen because the clock doesn't start until the whole thing is set. And in the CFL, you can run the play even when the clock goes to zero.
right, as long as you start, you know, as long as you start the ball's down and it's live, and then you go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
the other thing, and I'll add a couple of things to there. So for those of you that didn't see, so what happened was it's like hurry up offense. So you can imagine hurry up offense, and all of a sudden the offensive line gets down. They're on all threes, right? They're in defensive posture, and the problem was that Dak Prescott, instead of handing the ball to the official, handed it to the center. And when he handed it to the center, he was standing behind the center. The referee that has to touch the ball to put the ball in play, right? It was a dead ball until he touches it. And he had to go through Dak. He had to go through the offensive lineman to touch it. And that little bit of time cost them, they couldn't get the play started. So it was a terrible situation. And it ended a game in a way that I don't think any football game should end. And you might ask, why are we talking about this? Well, we're talking about this because this is, one of the things that as football fans is great to watch because you can learn from other leagues' problems. Now, in this case, the Canadian Football League, as David said, doesn't have this issue. This is not an issue in the Canadian Football League. This wouldn't happen in the Canadian Football League. But we've seen in the Canadian Football League a few years ago before pass interference became a thing. There was a game I think it was in Hamilton against Montreal. Hamilton was the home game. Montreal, home team. Montreal was the visiting team. There was a pass interference that wasn't called, and it cost the Hamilton Tiger Cats the game. And because of that, in the off season, there were changes made, and they decided to institute the pass interference call by referees, right? And also you could call it. You could make the call, right? So this is why I'm saying it. And this is what the Canadian Football League can do and what the NFL can do as well, is that we see things like this, David. If it happens during the regular season, it really doesn't matter. The issue is when something like this happens in the playoffs, it becomes a bone of contention because it's not just about a team getting out out of the playoffs like that. It's the fans and the game itself. Because now we're not talking about a game in a season. We're talking about the Dallas Cowboys don't get to move on because of something that didn't look right. It didn't fit. It definitely doesn't pass the smell test, right?
No, and at the same, I mean, this is also, I mean, I'm not going to complain too much because this is just a team that clearly mismanaged a situation that you can't mismanage because you have to understand what you need to do in those situations. You know, give the ball to the referee, don't get in his way, things like that. But at the same time, yeah, I feel like how much more excitement would there be if teams weren't allowed to just run off the clock in those situations, or a team gets every last chance to try to make that last play? It just makes for better finishes, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. No. It definitely created a situation where a great game went out with a whimper, because that's what that was. It went out with a whimper. Can you imagine, just to make the point? Obviously, it's an obvious. This is a slam dunk as far as I'm concerned. Imagine how much better the game would have been if Dak Prescott got a chance to get under center, reach back, and go for what would have been about a 40-yard pass, a 35, 40-yard pass.
Yeah, it would have been like 30 yards. Yeah, like those are the like you want to give a team every chance to try to complete everything, because you don't want a game ending on a totally. I've seen it before where teams have not had enough time to spike the ball at the end, and it's
Yeah.
just like like there is, yes, I get there's a bit of nerves, and excitement with teams trying to rush up and get that ball spike. But I'm like, is that really where you want the game to be? Do you really want it to focus on make sure you get the spike down, or should it be on, all right, give everyone time, set up at the line, blow the play in, have the clock start, and then you're going for it. Like it to me, I think that's where I really like the CFL um, thrives in that it gives teams that chance that if you got a chance to win it and you're marching down the field, we're not gonna let the clock run out on you until you get that absolute last play.
And you know what? Because it is the last play, it's far more memorable. Like if that play, if that, if a play like we're talking about, people remember. We've seen it over the years. Lots of 30-yard passes. Let's say at the end of the half, or uh, during they're great plays, and we remember them. But when it's the last play of the game, when we're talking about a big play at the end of the game, that's what history's made out of. When we see Franco Harris, when we see all these great football players that have made great plays, and we see the Hail Marys through history, and the way teams have won in the last second, they missed a historical moment. Now, I'm not saying it's the end of football because of this. I'm just saying they missed an opportunity for a truly historical moment. And even if the pass is incomplete, it's still a historical moment, and it still ends the game in a very exciting fashion. And that's what gets missed. I hate to overmake that point, but that to me is the crux of what we're talking about here. And this is what we hope we have in the CFL, that exciting play at the end of the game.
Yeah, because yeah, I mean we've had so many of those, and look, and the NFL has had them too. I'm not going to say that like that's one thing the CFL has over the NFL completely, because we have seen great plays come right down to the end. It's just you have to in a way think of the entertainment of the game in some regards. What's going to make for the more entertaining finish? And what was everybody talking about? Oh, look how they terribly managed the clock. Look at how
Yeah.
terrible that final play was. It wasn't about the game itself,
Or a
which
play.
right, and it was
Right.
all about they couldn't set themselves up in time to get that last play, which I'm sorry.
A
And
negative ending to the game. This is
yeah.
the whole thing. Because no matter what, that Hail Mary pass that's going into the end zone, right? It ends up positively for somebody, negatively for somebody. But there's a positive end to it. A great defensive play or a great offensive play. But the way it ended was a thud. It was just a terrible, terrible thud. It was a great game, and no one here. I don't think you. I know you aren't, because we talked before the show, and I know for a fact that in no way are you saying that San Francisco didn't deserve to win. We agree that San Francisco was the better team. Um, was it the better team if the rules were a little different? That's of course an open question. But as the rules are laid out today in the NFL, they deserved the win, and they were full value for the win. And we've seen it in the Canadian Football League, right? What we saw the Dallas Cowboys do is what we saw the Toronto Argonauts do with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Two perfectly good examples. And on top of that, unruly fans. At the end, there were shots of the players, the Dallas players, going into the tunnel, and people at first were mistaken. I say they were mistaken because I found out later, and I took a closer look at the video, that they were saying they were throwing beer cans at the players, mainly because one of the players had his helmet and bounced it off his helmet, right? The beer can, right? But if you notice, just before that player went in, the referees went in that tunnel as well, just before he did. So what they were doing is they were throwing. It doesn't make it any better.
No.
It just makes it actually worse. If worse can be throwing cans of beer at players, your home team, or the referees. I'm not justifying either and not saying either is better. Either way, it's terrible. But in the name of accuracy, that was the root of it. Was not angry fans because Dallas lost. It was angry fans because they feel the referees took the game away from them. And then Dak Prescott put his foot in his mouth.
Yeah, that was brutal. That like I'm sorry. I know you're upset. You do, and look, as a Cowboys fan, You do not, in any regard. I know he was maybe trying to make a joke out of it, but you don't make a joke out of fans throwing things, whether at players or referees. We just went through this. How many? Just a month ago with Tiger Cats fans and what they did. It's in
But
no
there's no
way,
justification.
no justification.
None.
And I still think that there has to be further pun. Like if you really care about the safety of those who are at games or players and officials, fans should not be allowed back in those situations. You throw something at someone and they get hit with it, you're out. Even if they don't get it.
I don't even think you should wait till they hit somebody. I think just
Yes,
the
I was.
fact that they throw it. I heard you. You were correcting what you were saying.
So yeah,
I agree with you 100%. There's no reason for projectiles headed towards anyone, official, player, that there is, and those people who get caught doing that should not be allowed in the stadium ever again. They should lose their right to be there. Period.
yeah, exactly. I think I couldn't agree more with that.
That there's no justification for doing that, and there's no excuse. And it's one of those things where there's no gray area. You don't get to do that. So the Dallas Cowboys lose. They don't move on. The San Francisco 49ers with Garofalo as quarterback. This is a kid, I'm talking about him now because now, again, we're looking at parallels between the Canadian Football League and the NFL. Both David and I like watching football. It doesn't matter whether it's the Canadian Football League or the NFL. We care a lot more about the CFL. We watch more intently with the CFL, and we pick and choose our spots right when it comes to the NFL.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So now you look at Garofalo. We've talked about the Canadian Football League, and maybe it's time for quarterbacks in the CFL like Garofalo. He was
Garoppolo.
a
Come on.
Garofalo.
Oh, yeah, we got to
Yeah,
go.
I know. Okay, I want to say it the other way, but
You
my
can go
mother
Jimmy G if you want.
Garofalo.
If you
Jimmy
want to
G.
go with what how everyone calls him.
He was a number two behind a pretty good quarterback, and the Canadian Football League has a lot of great quarterbacks. The problem that the Canadian Football League is having is it has been difficult for me anyway to see any new era quarterbacks. The last group of quarterbacks that came out in the CFL uh, were Harris and the guy who won the MOP this year at the Grey Cup. You know, I don't know of any. I mean, their Cat fans are going to say Dane, 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 but Dane hasn't won the game. He hasn't been the sole number one. He's been a 1A, right? Mazzoli is a guy that we could have said, he's not much younger than Caleros and Harris, right? So he's probably from that generation too. I'm wondering, can the CFL, and this has been your thing here, you've got Garofalo ends up coming from Boston, from New England, and goes to San Francisco, and he does a great job of being a quarterback. Now I don't know if we have, Dominic Davis has been released by Ottawa. Is he the guy? Is he a guy that can find a new home and be a great quarterback like Garofalo? Do you identify any quarterbacks? Bethel Thompson in Toronto, he's one of those guys that, again, he's not much younger than Harrison, and
Well, he's not. Yeah, like there's no when we're talking about like younger guys, like Vernon Adams is probably
right.
the closest thing.
And the mayor of Calgary, Meyer, be
Yeah,
another one if he pans out.
and maybe
But
Nathan Rourke in
Nathan Work
BC.
again, but we're not talking about guys who have proven that they're number one quarterbacks. I think Dane Evans he's like, well, I'll put it this way. He's our best bet right now, right? Outside of him, somebody on the verge. Who else is on the verge?
Yeah,
And who
I
named?
don't really, and this is where I believe that I think Calgary. I mean, sorry, Calgary. Edmonton actually just signed a new quarterback today, and they're talking about how he could be a good dual threat. Khalil Tate. He's he he's another California quarterback. played for the University of Arizona, a good, decent football school. Um, 23-year-old, so a younger guy, and he's got and the important thing is he's a dual threat option because he's a guy that he'll throw it, but he's not afraid to run it. And I think that's what makes for if you look at a lot of these quarterbacks now, and I'm going to bring the NFL into it, a lot of them that have that ability to rush the football, it adds excitement because they can make plays even when there isn't a play. And I
And
think that's something the
there's a guy
CFL
in
needs to get.
Kansas City that proves that theory.
Exactly. Like we need to get back to guys that are not afraid to do in some ways. If there's not a play, all right, I'll be the one man offense. Whatever you can to get to really move things forward. So, I mean, again, we don't have
And the
that
guy in Buffalo too, right?
Yeah,
And
of
the guy
course.
in Buffalo too.
He's probably right now. I mean, right now this weekend's NFL matchup has two of arguably the top quarterbacks in the league going up against each other because they can do it both ways.
That's going
And
to be a great game. That's going to be a great game.
I truly believe that too.
It's going to be a great game, and it's going to be a game where the quarterbacks are going to decide the game one way or the other. And you know the thing of it is in the Canadian Football League, we talk about offense is no lead is safe, right? That's what we hear. That's what we talk about. And they've really, I don't know if it's the fault of the pandemic, David. I don't know if it's the fault of they haven't been able to really practice and or work with quarterbacks in the quarterback room to the extent that they need to. I don't know what they can do to produce better quarterbacks much quicker than they are right now because it just isn't working right now. And I really think that it's not, we talk about the CFL and every coach and every GM in the Canadian Football League says if you want to win, you need a quarterback. But I just don't see the urgency in the Canadian Football League, not the teams. I don't see the urgency in the Canadian Football League in producing good quarterbacks and helping teams to figure out a way to produce, better quarterbacks. I'm not saying that I have the answers. I just don't see or hear anything that looks like it's an answer.
I'm not really hearing it either. I what options really are there? I just don't know.
I, I, I might say that one of the options is that I guess maybe it's time that they work a way of making quarterbacks. Um, I don't know, an extra quarterback that doesn't count against the cap. I don't know, something that keeps a quarterback able to dress and able to get reps during a game. I know you have backup quarterbacks, folks. You know for a fact that we saw at least the Argos talk about it this year, where Arbuckle left because they felt the other guy was a better third and one quarterback. So
Yeah.
now if you're number one quarterback, that's a quarterback, not a running quarterback. If he is not playing well, you throw your running quarterback in, or do you have a third option where a quarterback that actually you want for the one position, if you will? Like I don't know. Like I said, I don't have the answers. I just haven't heard or seen anything that sounds like we can increase the pace of building good quarterbacks.
Can I make one suggestion?
Sure.
Can we get anybody other than a quarterback to do those second and ones, third and ones?
Like a running back?
A running back, fullback. You have fullbacks. A lot of CFL teams have fullbacks on the roster. Use them. Come on.
Eduardo, can you do me a favor? Can you turn off your mic?
I don't know if you can hear. There we are.
Yeah.
I was waiting. I was waiting for that one. But in all seriousness, you're wasting a position on your roster where you only have two. You only have two quarterbacks you're allowed to dress. My first gripe with that, of course, because in the NFL, most teams can have three quarterbacks around at least. So if you're only going to have two, I'm sorry. If I'm a CFL coach, I'm fine. You, I know that there are players other than quarterbacks capable of taking a snap and grabbing a ball. Or you try something. I think maybe this is another case where, and a lot of teams are struggling with those 3rd and 1s and those short yardage plays. Try something else. You know how many times I've said you could easily go if you line up with the idea of a QB sneak, but instead you run a play action pass. I guarantee most you catch a lot of teams off guard with that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, that, it doesn't happen enough. The reason you put a quarterback in there to run is because of the threat that he might throw, but they don't seem to throw that much anyway. So what's the threat?
Exactly.
It's the reason you're putting him there, because you have the threat of him throwing, but he never throws. You know, it is like, but this is the minutia that, the point is, the point is, and I want to make sure what the point that I'm trying to make, and that is that there aren't quarterbacks in the pipeline that are visible to us and the fans. I consider myself a fan and a guy who covers the game. And I just don't see a pipeline of quarterbacks. There should be enough quarterbacks out there ready to be starters for every team. We're almost there. The problem is it's kind of inverted now this season. The very expensive guys are the guys that are out there left to, the last couple of chairs are going to be taken up by guys who have a lot of experience and are worth a lot of money. My point is, we don't have the guys who are just on the cusp of trying to prove something that a team can pick up, like Edmonton did from BC with Riley. That's what I'm looking for. I want to be able to see that, where a CFL team can pick up a quarterback off another team that's an actual starter, right? Not one that's left at the end of the year and, okay, like Dominique Davis. Not that he can't be a starter. I hope he makes me look like a fool, and somebody picks him up and he becomes a great starter. I would love that. The embarrassment would totally be buried by the fact that I would be happy.
Yeah, I mean, and probably my best example, the best example I can think of too, was when Zach Claros left the Argos to go to Hamilton. This was a guy that came, he was trying to get his way through, didn't see an option in Toronto. Hamilton's like, all right, we'll give you a shot. And guess what? Right away, it didn't take long. He was one of the better quarterbacks. A lot of people were upset in Toronto that Claros left because of what he was doing in Hamilton. So, I think Calgary tried to do that when they took why is the name escaping me? He was with Toronto and the Canadian quarterback.
Jeepers creepers. I know who you're talking about now. I feel
Oh
stupid.
my
I'm not.
god, why am I forgetting this?
Big kid.
Michael O'Connor.
O'Connor, thank you. Big kid.
So that's why, like, I was thinking, oh, it was tough that the Argos, put in time to develop this guy. Gone. And then, like, that's the other issue too, is how many Dakota Prukop spent how many years in Toronto? Gone. Like, we have too many of those quarterbacks who, like, what are you working them towards? Like David Watford in Hamilton. We saw Matt Schultz do a little something in Montreal when Vernon Adams was down. Like, what are we doing with these other quarterbacks in practice? Sometimes you see 3-4 quarterbacks in practice. Well, what's the point? What are you building them towards? What are you working for? Like, what do you
Why? The question you're asking is why they're not working out more often into becoming starting quarterbacks, is what you're asking.
exactly? If they all have the talent to do it, why aren't we seeing that lead to something?
That's the $1 million question. That it really would be helpful if we had too many quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League. Because if we had too many quarterbacks, we'd have a lot better teams.
I
Right?
think
We
so too.
wouldn't. A lot of the teams that aren't playing well are because, they and to be honest, and I love the people that are quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League, but if you only have a couple of guys that are really good, it drives the price up for those players, doesn't it? And then you don't end up, instead of spending, $7 million on 6 quarterbacks, you spend $7 million on 12 quarterbacks, and you end up with a better league. I don't know if I'm making my point, but anyway,
Like, it takes you spend money on these even if they're in practice roster, you're putting an investment into them, putting time,
Yeah,
to develop them. Like this is the part that really kills me. It's almost like you're throwing away, and I feel bad for these quarterbacks too because I guarantee some of them feel like they could do something, but they only can show something if they get the opportunity to do it. That's the frustrating part.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Well, we have Derek Dennis signed, re-signed, and he also talked about players, and this again is on the subject of maximizing the talent that's in the Canadian Football League. And he feels that players need a little more respect, and players should be hanging around on the same team more, longer. These are all things we've talked about. To hear it from a player, does it change anything in that he said? Does it change anything in you?
Uh this is a tough one because like I agree with what he's saying, but it's what are you marketing, right? A lot like something that's like, oh, we can't go out and do individual deals and market ourselves. And I'm just like, but what are you marketing towards? I think this is the first issue that the CFL needs to address because when you need to market your league, you need to determine one major thing. Who are you marketing towards? Right? Um, there was a report, there was I guess it was like a survey done that said CFL football thrives in the rural, small town markets and not in the big cities. So, what does that suggest to you? That the CFL is having a really hard time marketing itself in the big cities. Does that mean, we're not marketing our players enough and that's why we're not getting the exposure? I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is that people in those big cities don't view the CFL as anything worth getting excited about because there's not many names attached to it. There's not
Or
that recognition.
or there's too much competition for the entertainment dollar in the big cities, where you have to, the Canadian Football League, I've always said this and I'll continue to say it, they got to bring back the cool factor somehow. I don't know what that looks like. Again, I wish I had the answers, but what I do know is, the way the game is being played right now, it's not being played in a way that will bring in new fans. It might hold a lot of the old fans, but I can hear it from a lot of fans who are not happy with the game and the way it's being played right now. Um, it's not that there isn't any excitement, David. It's there isn't as much. It's not that there aren't great endings to games, because there are. There just aren't as much. Is it the pandemic, or worse? Are we resting on our laurels because of the pandemic? Are people taking a pause emotionally, that run the league, that make the league work, and everybody involved in the league? We're more concerned about getting to play, not how we play.
Yeah, and I think it also comes down to I look at what other sports do to market. Like I'm gonna bring in TFC and what they just did, bringing in a player of star caliber. One player is bringing up so much interest in a team. So is this maybe an opportunity for the CFL to say, you know what? What if we did this thing? You get one slot on your roster,
Like they used to have.
like they used to have. Remember what Rocket Ishmael did to Toronto? One spot on you get one designated spot on your roster, use it for wherever you want, and you get a cap. You can still cap it of this amount of money to pay towards that player. Because just by having that player here already brings up your marketability. You don't even need to spend that much money to market them. Just by bringing them in and what they provide, it already does it for you. And a lot of players don't want to come to the CFL right now because they look at how much money is they make, how much they get taxed. Because that was another thing when TFC brought in Insignia, that they had to work out a deal to deal with the taxes, and that's a big factor for a lot of these players. But if you were to
Canadian
incentivize,
dollar.
yeah, if you were to incentivize these players in some way, and it's just one player, even if it's a quarterback, I guarantee it may not make a massive difference. It will make a noticeable difference.
Well, when you walk by the stadium, when you walk by a theater, when you walk by anything, it's the marquee that can bring you in sometimes. What you see on that marquee, that, oh, that's what's going on, right? Something that's a real hook. I guess it's not good enough to go, hey, we have the best game, we play the best football in the world. It's not good enough. There has to be some sort of cool factor, whether it's a marquee player, the excitement, generating some excitement for people in communities that are of the larger, types like BC and, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, where, the marquee matters more than it does in a small town, in the other towns like Saskatchewan, like Regina, right? Uh, the game is more important there. The team is more important there. Um, can we make, when someone says the Montreal Alouettes, Toronto Argonauts, or BC Lions, can we make the people in those communities go, right? What do you got to do to make that happen? Is your answer a marquee player the way to go? They got to try everything, David. They got to try stuff, because the league cannot go in this way, because it's going quickly into the night if it's not careful. We saw a great Grey Cup game. No complaints about that game. Well, if you're a Hamilton Tiger Cat fan, you have a couple of complaints. It was a great game to watch. The playoffs, for the most part, were fantastic, but again, it got ruined in Toronto with what happened in Hamilton. Next year, we're not going to be talking about as much about the team as we're going to be talking about the first. So what happened with that? What are the ramifications of what happened in that last game? Can you tell us what happened? That'll be the questions. That'll be in the front of people's thinking. What's that all about? And how are you going to avoid doing something like that again, or having something like that happen again? This is the problem. So, we need to figure out a way here. And I say we, a collective we of CFL fans, CFL people involved with the game, on what is it that we need to make this league better? Because we know the game can be much better. It just hasn't had a chance to shine because of issues we brought up already. Like, there's not enough good quarterbacks. We're missing the next generation of quarterbacks. That's my first thing. That's my first thing that to me is the biggest problem that the Canadian Football League has right now.
And I think the other issue is name recognition. If you go out, you know what? People know what the CFL is. That's not the issue. The issue pertains to they know who the teams are, they know the league. They don't have any clue. A lot of the casual fans have no clue who the players are. I've had many people ask me, "Oh, who's I be at the game and I would go talk with some friends in the stands, and I notice people next by, they have no clue who the players are, or they bring a guest and they don't know who the players are. They're there to watch the game. That's good. You want them to watch the game, but if you ask them who's that player, they can't name them. Now, this is the worst example, but everyone knows who Tom. Even those who don't watch the NFL know who Tom Brady is. Those who don't watch the NFL probably know who Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they know who these guys are.
Marquee players.
Marquee players. And I think that's something the CFL is really missing. CFL has good players, don't get me wrong. There's just not enough of those marquee guys that you can really market players around. I think maybe that's where Derek Dennis is
Yeah,
coming
I
from.
think that's where he's coming from, and I think where he's coming from too. And I have to say, if this is what he's saying, he's looking at it from a player's perspective, where he's saying, you don't appreciate me that much enough, right? Essentially, that's what his whole story came up. That's what I heard. I heard you don't appreciate me enough, and when I say me, I mean, you don't appreciate players enough. The players aren't appreciated enough. They're not involved in making sure the game is out there. I guess the CFLPA is a partner in the Canadian Football League. The CFLPA has the ear of the commissioner and the owners.
Yep.
Between them all, they got to figure something out. They've got to figure out some sort of compromise and deal with the reality of what kind of financial situation they're in too, right?
Hmm.
Because full well the first thing the players want is they want to be paid well. Well, part of what a team's budget is advertising. Part of the league's budget is advertising. And if they don't have the money to advertise and don't have the money to pay players what players want, then we're fighting an uphill battle. Somebody has to step in and say, well, let's get in touch with reality here and let's do something about this and accept the reality that if we don't all sacrifice now, we don't all benefit later. And to get people to do that in this day and age, to say, hey, listen, I need you to sacrifice for a little while so that we can make more money. People are pretty jaded today. Nobody's buying that right now. It doesn't sell.
No, and I totally agree with that. I truly think that we're at a point now where there's such a fight for dollars, but it's the wrong fight, right? The league is trying to figure out ways to help its revenues, but hasn't really found that it hasn't found the right way, in my opinion, to generate those revenues, because I don't think it really they're too it's too much on the what's worked for us in the past. Why would we change it? Well, the reason why is because it's not working in the other areas, in the areas that makes the most sense. So yeah, I think that's where the CFL needs to cut. It needs to change. And the thing is, if you're not willing to change and changing in the right way, that's the other problem. The
Yeah.
league does not have to change its rules to be a bit more marketable league, or I don't think it needs to do that. But it needs to find a way to market the product on the field, because we keep hearing them say we think we have the greatest product on the field. Well, if people don't aren't talking about the product on the field, and are too busy talking about the issues you're having off the field, you're spinning your wheels.
I'd like to also add before we go out, we got a few minutes left, so I want to make sure I get this in. It's not to say that teams aren't understanding they need to work together, because it's become common knowledge, at least in the media, that the Saskatchewan Roughriders understand and are willing to buy into the idea of revenue sharing. Now, to have a team like Saskatchewan say they're willing to do that, like I said, uh, for them to do that, that's quite a leap. When you look at today and the way things work today, and the way it's me. So the generosity of the Saskatchewan Roughriders is apparent now. You know, it sounds like they're willing to do something like that, but I can understand that people are saying, why the heck should a small market team, because that's what Saskatchewan is, a small market team, support MLSC, a giant corporation in the billions of dollars, who need help to run a football team financially?
It all comes down to working together for the greater good of the league. And you know what? MLSC has had to prop up other teams and other leagues as well,
Yep.
because they have the money to do it. Like, that's the whole point of revenue sharing. It doesn't matter who is involved. That's a collective effort of everyone involved to say, you know what, we need to do what we can to ensure that our league is thriving. And this is I think this is probably the one of the few times where I feel like the CFL has come together to say, all right, we need to work together here to bring this all together. Not but they're a big corporation and they should figure it out for themselves. That's not a cohesive league. That's not working together to solve your problem. That's just blaming someone else for their issues, and why should you help them out?
Yeah.
That's not what a league is about, in my opinion.
No, and there have to be, as much as the Argos were victimized by what happened after the last game, it's still an issue they have to deal with, and regardless of their of any blame that goes, in management's the Argo management side. We know that a player was blamed. Player was suspended for a few games. Um, you know, could it have been avoided? Um, you know, and the reason I say this is that we can't afford to see mistakes like this in the Canadian Football League. They can't afford, these kinds of mistakes. Ones that suggest that their number one quarterback's not going to be able to play in the big playoff game because he went somewhere he shouldn't have gone. So, right now the Argos have some egg to remove, and that's unfortunate because they got other issues they need to take care of about, that are more important than that. And this is the difficulty that the Canadian Football League suffers together. So I guess what you're saying and what I agree with is I think that as a league, they have to figure out how to avoid these kinds of mistakes. I do a show as well with the National Lacrosse League, and the owners there have a commissioner who brings in new ownership groups and speaks to existing ownership groups and has come to some conclusions as to what makes a successful franchise. And they've done a pretty good job of that, not making the kind of mistakes that new ownership does or ownership that's failing. They don't let ownerships fail. So I think the Canadian Football League needs to get into that category because I don't know how they do it. They can't afford to have teams go through spells like the Argos went through before this past year, the one that Ottawa's going through. I mean, teams can't win all the time. I think we can agree on that. Teams can't always win, but it's when they lose in a horrible way that's no good. The competitive nature of every team has to be 100%, that they're competitive. And the reason they lose is because they're not as good, not because they're bad. That's in the Canadian Football League. There's only 9 teams. You can't afford to have a couple of bad teams. That's a high percentage of the league, right? And so everybody gets to see those teams often, right? So that they got to figure out a way to bring quarterbacks in to summarize what we're talking about here. Well, how do you feel about teams and the fact that they play badly? Is there something other teams in the league can do to help teams not hit such low rock bottom situations?
Oh, I I don't know
You got a
really.
minute. You get to solve Rubik's cube in
Oh
a
my
minute.
god, yeah, let's yeah. I
That's it.
just
I'll
think
leave you with the last word, buddy.
all I'm just gonna say is that the league needs to. I think if the league continues to ignore the issues by not by continuing to ignore the issues, I don't know if we're gonna get anywhere uh, with the CFL in that regard. And I think really this is now the time where CFL fans and the league really need to listen
Mhm.
and really listen to outside opinions. I think maybe that's where the CFL needs to consider. Look
So they did good
outside.
going. They did go into the XFL. Thanks, David. They did
That's
good
right.
talking to the XFL, I guess.
Yeah, and well, I'm sure we'll have lots of time to continue to talk about this. I think
No kidding. Well, thanks, David. It was a pleasure as usual.
pleasure's all mine.
For David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody.